Welcome to Inspiring Working Lives, the Morgan Hunt podcast where we explore public sector leadership journeys. From honest chats about career highs and lows, to lessons and wisdom to inspire the next generation of leaders that will shape our society.
Hello, and welcome to the Morgan Hunt Inspiring Working Lives podcast. Today's guest is Julie Kapsalis, Principal and Chief Executive of Nescot, North East Surrey College of Technology. Julie has been Principal and CEO of Nescot since 2022, guiding the college to a strong Ofsted Good rating in 2023. With a career spanning education, enterprise and economic development, she previously held senior roles at Chichester College Group and worked on national initiatives including London 2012 legacy projects. She is also a committee member at Epsom Downs Racecourse, reflecting her commitment to regional growth and community engagement. Her leadership has earned multiple awards, including Institute of Economic Development Leader of the Year 2023 and recognition at the 2024 Dynamic Awards for Innovation and Community Impact.
Hey, Julie, it is wonderful to welcome you to Morgan Hunt today. Thank you so much for coming in. We're going to have a conversation today about you and your history and how you've got to this wonderful position with the college that you lead at the moment. But I want to take you back to your childhood to begin with. What was it like, and did you have any career aspirations as a child?
Well, there's a place to start.
All right.
So yes, I did have a lot of career aspirations, quite a lot of them that were deemed to be unachievable. And actually that's something that's really driven me, that actually if you have a dream, I believe you should be able to follow it. I wanted to be either an actress or a fashion designer.
Wow, yes.
So I think what's quite interesting, having two young kids of my own now, I reflect on those two aspirations, and actually I think I'm able to, in my job now, use some of the, areas I was interested in my role as a college principal and chief exec.
Right, okay. So there's lots of talk about dreams like that. Do you encourage dreams, whether it's fashion or sport or being on the stage with young people?
Hugely. One of the most inspirational things that one of our students has said to me is, why not me?
Right.
So this was an incredible young lady called Azezia, who came to us from a special school focusing on young people with dyslexia. And she came to Nescot and she studied art, and she achieved her level 2 and then level 3 qualification with a distinction, and she went on to study at fine art at Lady Margaret Hall College, Oxford.
Wow.
Why not her? So I do think you should encourage people to dream big. Also to make sure there's an element of realism, that actually they're not going to, find themselves in a position where they're never going to be satisfied. But actually I think it is really important with young people to find out what's their passion, what's their driver, and to say, why not you?
So coming back to you then, you had those passions, you had those drivers, but I'm not speaking to you now as a world, fashion designer as such. Where did the road into professional life take you?
There's still time for me to become a fashion designer, again, isn't that a fascinating part of working in education and skills? It's not just young people you're working with. You're often looking at career changes or people partway through their life. I hate the expression, midlife crisis, because actually why shouldn't people decide they've always had that dream and they're going to come back to it? And that's something I love about adult skills. Hold that thought. I may yet have another career ahead of me. But I think for me, the common thread with my passions and interests as a child has actually been communication, which is key, I think, particularly in the world of acting. And I think in the role of a leader within a large organisation, communication is essential.
It's often tricky to get it right as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And trust me, your staff tell you when you've got it wrong as well.
So that communication came through, and that leads to your first sort of big role, I guess, or was in communication and PR, is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I studied English literature at university, having dropped out of studying fashion.
Right.
Which was always tricky to admit to your parents you've made a mistake and you want to do something different. But what studying English really taught me was that power of writing, of oral communication, of making an argument, of backing up an argument, of really disseminating different viewpoints and some originality of thought, hopefully. And so when I left university, what do you do with that? My parents, when I said I wanted to do a master's degree, just went, no. So I felt an obvious pathway was in public relations, communications and marketing. So that's where I started my career.
Right. And these were quite interesting posts you had in the early days.
Yeah, I was incredibly lucky that the first job I had was working for what was an iconic PR agency, Jackie Cooper PR, run by Jackie herself and Robert Phillips, her business partner, who at that point in time in the 90s and early 2000s were the cutting edge PR agency. And indeed, Jackie is still someone who inspires me enormously. And we were working on major international brands, Coca-Cola, Mars, Scottish Courage, Procter & Gamble, London Fashion Week, Beck's Beer. What an incredible first job to be working on those brands and working under somebody who I still believe is one of the most creative and genius minds in the sector, Jackie.
Brilliant. Yeah, I mean, it must have been full of wonderful people as well.
Many wonderful people, many of whom I'm still in touch with, one of whom is godfather to my son, but incredibly creative people who understood the power of brand, crisis management, communications, and actually when you're actually having to work on another brand and immerse yourself in their values and their messaging. So a brilliant first job.
That must have been tough. Did you ever come across brands where you thought, oh, I just don't get this, or I can't get into them? Or
never that I didn't get, but one of our clients, and actually a product I'm very fond of, although I don't wear it personally, nor does my husband, is we did the PR for Old Spice aftershave. And Old Spice has had a reputation over the years, unfairly, of, being the thing that, your dad was given in his stocking for Christmas and didn't want. But actually, I'm a real believer in actually there's an affection in there and there's a history. And I'm really fascinated, actually, in a whole host of brands. And I've learned a huge amount about how you can turn perceptions into that sort of retro cool brand. And I think Old Spice is quite retro cool.
Yes, yeah, wow. Old Spice, yeah, I remember Brut as well. They competed for a period of time.
They did.
Okay, right. So in this new world, it sounds really exciting, and I know you worked on some really exciting clients as well. Tracy Emin is one that you mentioned to me.
Yeah, again, I look back at that first job and I look back at my sort of slightly misspent youth at times in my early 20s, and I've always been very passionate about art and British artists, and Tracy Emin has always been an artist I've admired enormously. And when I was interviewed for the job, the agency had just won a piece of business to launch the Beck's Futures Art Awards, which at the time, was seen alongside the Turner Prize. And Tracy was heavily involved in the setting up of it and the launch at the ICA. And I think it was either my first or second evening working there was the launch party. And that was a kind of a pinch me moment, with which I've had quite a few in my career, of real privilege to actually be working alongside someone I admire and respect so much.
Wonderful. This sounds like a job you'd never want to leave.
Yeah, and I do look back sometimes and think, what if I'd stayed in that world and that industry? And as I said, I do still think that common thread of communications and events and crisis management is still there. It's quite high pressured and quite stressful. A bit like FE, actually.
Yes, we will come on to that. So what was the pathway then from the launch party with Tracy Emin through to further education?
Yeah, so quite random, and I have to say not planned at all. I'd love to sit here and tell you I had this entire career path drawn out. So I guess for personal reasons, I moved from working in London. I met my now husband, and I moved to work for a smaller but still very significant PR and sports sponsorship organisation. And again, was very fortunate to work on a number of large brands, working on V-Shop, which was part of Virgin's music business at the time, UGC Cinemas, and also the company worked on a lot of sports sponsorship, including one of my passions, darts. So that was an interesting move into understanding sponsorship and understanding activation of sponsorship. So I worked there for a couple of years, and again learnt a huge amount before I took a random, but one I've never regretted, step into the world of economic development.
Well, we'll come back to that in a second.
Yeah.
Were you a darts fan before you worked in the world of sponsorship and darts?
Always.
Really?
In my household as a child, like the key weekend sporting moment was Bullseye. And I remember we had a darts board in our garage and playing with my brother. You know, could you get 101 or more with 6 darts to win the speedboat or the caravan or the whole keep out the black and in the red, nothing in this game for 2 in a bed? You know, were you going to win the hostess trolley? Stuff of dreams, stuff of my childhood.
Look what you could have won.
Look what you could have won. I know.
Okay, so from there and this economic development role then, how did that come about?
Yeah, so it was for personal reasons actually, and when I reflect on a number of my biggest career changes, it has been because of my personal life at the time and reassessing what was important. And at the time I was travelling a huge amount with my role, and I wanted just to have a little bit more time to focus on me and on my relationship with my now husband. And so I was looking for a job perhaps with a little bit less travel. Every time I've sort of done that and thought, oh, that will be easier, I've gone into a world that has had a whole new level of pressure. So I saw a job advertised in PR Week for a marketing manager, I think was the job role, at the South East England Development Agency. Right. So this is back in the days of the new Labour government, Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, and this big focus on regional economic development. And it was based 10 minutes down the road, and I thought, yeah, that'll be a job that will give me a bit more time outside of work. So I applied and I got the job, and that's how I ended up initially in economic development.
And am I right in saying that from economic development you found a way into colleges?
Yes, so I have to say I didn't enjoy marketing at Cedar. I guess because of some of the stuff we were doing, it was very different to the world I'd been used to before, and I found it a little bit restrictive. I could do it, but I felt I wasn't making the most of my creative side. Again, it comes down to, I think, meeting people who believe in you. And it was the early days. You'd come into the office and my boss would say, we're leading on a new project this week. We're leading on women's enterprise. We've got some budget from the government. We need to set up a task force. You're going to a meeting tomorrow. Get on with it. And whilst that was petrifyingly terrifying, and I can remember travelling up to London on the train, like, thinking, what am I going into? You know, manically on my BlackBerry trying to work out, you know, what I was doing, who I was going to be seeing. But what I was very lucky and very privileged to do through that was get involved in whole new areas of economic development, including inward investment, business startups, business growth, women's enterprise, sport, but also skills. So I managed the Business Link contract for the South East, and part of that was Train to Gain, which a number of colleges in the region were key parts of. So that was my first foray into skills.
So you started to sort of liaise with colleges and go to meetings and have conversations around it.
I'm ashamed to say at that point I didn't actually go into a college. It was only later, when I had my first job interview for a job at a college, that I crossed the threshold. But I certainly was at a lot of meetings with leaders from the education sector, and I started to become more aware of the role that colleges played, but predominantly from an employer perspective as opposed to from a learner perspective.
So everybody should go to a college, shouldn't they, as well?
100%. I will clear my diary all day, every day, to show people around my college, because when they come in, they leave going, I had no idea colleges did that. Or I've lived in Epsom 20 years. I drive past your college every day and I didn't know that was here.
It's crazy, isn't it?
It is crazy.
We've got to do something to get those doors open and show the value that colleges bring to communities. Okay, so who hooked you in then? How did this happen? How did you suddenly go, right, you're on that side, you need to be on this side?
So I'd love to say at that stage I had that thought process, but it wasn't still there. I think I was still, at that point in time, I was doing a lot of work on women's enterprise, which is a real passion of mine, and the work I did with Pam Alexander, who chaired the Women's Enterprise Task Force under Gordon Brown. One of my professional achievements before working in a college I'm most proud of. So it really hadn't occurred to me at that time to look at moving the other side of the fence. What it took for me to reassess my life again and that next chapter, again, it went back to something personal. So we knew that regional development agencies were likely to go. You had the change of government. And what was known, I think rather disrespectfully, but as the bonfire of the Quangos, which I think was a shame because there was a lot of great work being done. I think change isn't always a bad thing, but I think a lot of good work, it was a real shame that everything was just went. Added to that complication, I was pregnant with my first son. So I knew I was going to find myself in a situation where I was made redundant while I was on maternity leave. And so for me, that meant I had a period of time, a little bit helped by being on maternity leave and by redundancy pay, but to decide, what am I going to do next? And at that stage, local enterprise partnerships hadn't fully been developed. And so I initially did some consultancy work with former colleagues from CEDA. But actually, the one thing I decided with that is I'm much better working in a team. Working on my own on a consultancy project, I can do it, I think, reasonably well, but I thrive and I spark off being part of a larger team. So I saw a job advert on LinkedIn for a role at Guildford College. Again, at this point, having never crossed the threshold into an FE college. And it was for a role that covered sort of business development and employer engagement. And geographically, it was very close. And so that was something that I looked at and was interested in.
So you applied and got it?
I did apply and I did get it. And it was a bit daunting, actually. You know, being someone who, I'm not a teacher. Whilst I had, actually by this stage, I had 2 kids. I've kind of missed a bit of the time out. I'd never really engaged with kids of that sort of age, 16 to 18. So it's a bit daunting when you first walk into a college and you're surrounded by all these wonderful young people. I don't think I should have worried, but I did. And I think that's an interesting piece for anyone moving from a different sector into FE. It's a different customer base. If I look back to my time working in marketing and PR, they're your customers. How are you going to engage with them? How are you going to support them? And I worked at Guildford College for a year and I learnt to love FE.
So that's really interesting because you had this wealth of experience doing really unique and wonderful jobs. You had that movement into sort of public sector funded work, but you've still got this kind of hang up that maybe I need to come from an academic background. But it's crazy really because all those things make for a wonderful sort of teaching experience you can give to others.
I think so. And it's interesting, at a couple of points in my career, both when I graduated from university, when my first son was born, where I was really grappling with, what am I going to do now? Yeah. I did half think about teaching, but various people, including my careers advisor at my university, told me I'd be wholly unsuitable and I should never look at it. It still hurts, that does. But I think it's actually reflecting, we have more roles in my college that are non-teaching roles than teaching roles.
Yes.
And, all of them are vital. You cannot run a college without your business support team, your estates team, your HR team, your technicians, all of those teams. And I think I'd never really thought about those opportunities within education until I saw that job and I walked into the college.
So you're then in the college, you're trying to hide this fact that I don't feel like I'm an academic and or I'm not a teacher as such. How did that break through then to that next level? How did you feel this was your place?
Yeah,
value?
I think because my first role at Guildford was very focused on the employer engagement side, I didn't truly have a chance to interact with the students as much as I would have liked to have done, which was because of the role I was in. But I think what intrigued me during my time there was the incredible opportunity that the FE offered young people, particularly some students who had struggled at school, people returning to college, that whole host of people who, and it drives me absolutely mad that not enough people see FE colleges as a first choice. Mm-hmm. And it intrigued me. And it made me think, yeah, I'm interested in staying in this sector. I think I've got more to give to this sector. I didn't really know what, but going back to some of my earlier examples, it took meeting someone senior in the sector who believed in me and said, yeah, come and have that chance.
Who was that person?
That person was Sheila LeGrave, who is currently the Further Education Commissioner.
Brilliant, right. I always think it's wonderful where there's somebody who can just see something, not only see it, but actually make the push, deliver the push to move people into somewhere where they believe they can belong and deliver value.
Yeah, so at the time, Sheila was Principal and Chief Executive of Chichester College. I first met her just after their outstanding Ofsted inspection, and I met her through both of us being on the board of Coast Capital Local Enterprise Partnership. And Sheila, in unique Sheila style, did sort of say to me at the board meeting, what are you doing here? I think she was a bit like, well, I represent the FE sector. And I talked to her about my experience in economic development and my passion for bringing together public, private and third sector. And off the back of that, I think it was later that evening or the next morning, I had an email from her saying, come and visit Chichester. And I know this sounds a little bit cheesy, but from the second I parked my car in the car park and I walked over the bridge that goes over the River Lavant into the college, before I even got in the door, I knew that was somewhere I wanted to work.
What was that thing that...
I can't really describe it. A lot of people say you can tell an outstanding college when you walk in. I hadn't even got in the door.
Yeah.
There was a buzz, there was a feel, students coming up to you saying, do you know where you're going? Members of staff saying hello. There was just a buzz that I thought and still do think is very special about that place.
Yes, wonderful. Okay, and then what did that lead to? That walk over the bridge? That
walk over the bridge, I know, it's kind of like, I'm imagining it in my head. So I met with Sheila and I got to learn a lot more about Chichester College. And then about 3 or 4 months later, they were advertising for a vice principal role to lead on the college's extensive portfolio of commercial businesses. And so I applied for the role and was lucky enough to be offered the job and work there for just over 8.5 years.
Wow, okay. But you sound like the right person for that role there.
I think there were a whole host of areas I was responsible for managing that, again, that imposter syndrome came back of thinking, I don't know how to manage this. But actually what through Sheila's leadership and management and other people, my executive coach, other people I've worked with over the years, was actually to recognise my role wasn't to be the expert. I managed international education. We had a wonderful team that actually knew what they were doing. My role was to get the best out of those managers, to look at how we could grow the business, to look at how we could enhance our partnerships and our relationships, to set a further level of ambition and to make stuff happen.
Got it. Okay. So you're happy in that role, you're busy in that role, this is a new world that you've discovered, all the experiences of your past are being brought into it, but 8.5 years later, you decide to do something different. So what kind of led to that?
Again, there's a whole host of things. Some of it was my kids were coming up to secondary school age, so there is a little bit geographically of thinking, as a family, where do we want to be for the next 5 or 6 years? And At times, I've struggled with that sort of work persona about how much I share about how much my family is important to my decision making and how much I keep that, outside of things. And actually, I've grown much more comfortable with being really honest and actually saying, no, a lot of my decisions are based about what's right for my family at this time, as well as myself. And I think that's really important as a leader to be able to do that, without sharing every last detail about, the rugby or football match results at the weekend. I think it's important to recognise that actually decisions are often made by those kind of circumstances. So there was an element of that. There was also an element of the fact that when Sheila had left Chichester College Group, I had applied for her role. And wasn't successful, lost out to someone who couldn't have been better for the role, Andy Green, who is there as Principal and Chief Exec, doing a brilliant job. But that also made me reflect, did I want to be a Principal and Chief Exec? I know you might say, well, of course you did, you'd applied for the job, but I'd applied for a job internally, and it was thinking about, did I want to go external with that? And that's hard when, Andy is a great leader. The college continues to go from strength to strength, and there was more I felt I could do there.
Yeah.
But I also decided maybe now is the time to see if my skills could be suitable for a role at another college. And again, it comes down to meeting people. Frances Rutter, who was Principal and Chief Exec at Nescot at the time, approached me and said they had a role coming up in her senior leadership team. It wasn't the Principal and Chief Exec role. Would I be interested in coming to the college? And it felt like the right step at the time to just move away, have a think about where I was going to go next, and have ended up as Principal and CEO at Nescot.
So essentially the touch paper was lit, wasn't it, when Sheila decided to move on?
Yeah, it's all Sheila's fault.
Yeah, okay.
This episode is brought to you by Morgan Hunt, a public sector recruitment agency with over 30 years of experience. Whether you're looking for your next role or growing your team, we match purpose-driven people with organisations making a real difference. Visit morganhunt.com to find out how Morgan Hunt inspires working lives.
Okay, so then you get the job at Nescot.
Yes, and I have to say, I still smile when I think about the day where I got the job. I did the role as an interim initially. I think they called it acting Principal and Chief Exec. Mm-hmm. Maybe I should have liked that. Maybe the frustrated actress in me, I hadn't thought of that before, should have taken that. I actually really dislike the word acting Principal and Chief Exec because it sounds like you're sort of pretending you're not really doing it. But I was the acting Principal and Chief Exec for 6 months, including through our Ofsted inspection. Which was a little terrifying, I have to say. But equally, one of the most powerful ways to bring a new team of people together behind one goal, one mission, particularly as my deputy and nominee had only been in place 4 weeks and we didn't know each other.
Gosh.
And then after that, I was appointed permanently.
Wow, okay, so that really is a baptism of fire.
Yeah.
So that acting principal role...
Yeah.
Why was it an acting principal of role? Why wasn't it a role?
It was, well, I think some of it is process. So the previous principal and chief exec was on sick leave. So there was a need, particularly as we knew that Ofsted phone call was going to be coming.
Yes.
You needed a leader in place. So that's why I stepped up, temporarily initially and then obviously permanently.
Great, okay. So you turn up.
Yeah.
You're meeting brand new people, some of them are pretty new to the role, and then suddenly Ofsted are coming.
Yeah.
How do you pull that together? What did you do to...
Oh, I went and had a little moment in my office where I sort of, breathed and was like, okay, we've got this. I knew it was coming, but, nothing sometimes waits till when you actually get the call. I genuinely think it was the best thing that could have happened for us as a team at that time. My predecessor as principal had done a huge amount of work preparing us for that piece, and it was actually saying to everyone, look, why do we do what we do every day? We do it because we want the best for our learners. We do it because we want to make sure that they are going to succeed, they're going to, where possible, meet their dreams, that they're in a safe place where they're going to have amazing experiences. And so for me, it was about saying, this is our opportunity to shine and to learn, because there will be things in the Ofsted inspection that we will think, yeah, we do need to do that better. And so it was really galvanising that sense of come on, this is our moment to shine. Let's all get behind this, and let's all put even some things that I knew I was going to have to deal with and look at moving forwards. But this was our moment. This was our 4 days, and let's come together. And I have to say, when on the final day, Andy, my deputy and nominee, and I stood on the stage in our theatre and shared the results, it was incredible. It was what the staff, what it meant to them, I can't put into words, that sense of pride. And once you have that, and that common goal, then you build.
Yes, exactly. And in some ways, having been dropped into that situation is quite good, because it does pull everything together without having to think, oh gosh, how do I create a narrative for the organisation?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So that's a challenge. It strikes me now that colleges and leaders in general have more challenges now than ever before. What are you dealing with at the moment? And then is there a framework that you adopt to help you and the organisation through that?
I think one of the things that I love about FE is the cycle of the year. So as we talk today, I'm in the middle of, it's induction day today. We've been through enrolment. And, every year with enrolment, it is that whole piece. Are we going to hit targets? Are we going to hit stretch targets? Which courses are going to be full? And there's a sort of stress in that, but there's also, I quite like that energy. That start of a new year is incredible. I love seeing new students come into the college. It's just an absolute thrill to think, you're going to have the privilege of that opportunity of introducing them to a new subject and that next step on their career. But equally, if you don't hit your numbers in those first few weeks in September, you don't pick up many other 16 to 18-year-olds during the year.
Yeah.
So there's always that pressure point that every college has. I mean, other things, funding, still a challenge, continues to be, and we have to make very, very difficult decisions. I would say we're still seeing increased issues around mental health and well-being of students. How do we make sure we've got the right support in place for those learners? So yes, there are a number of significant issues facing the sector. One of the other ones that really resonates with me is the GCSE Maths and English retakes and the vast numbers of young people and people of all ages coming to college to retake their GCSE Maths and English that didn't get them. What really frustrates me is those students who are going to struggle to ever get them, and that sense of failure that they hold, that I think is a really negative and really unhelpful view to enabling that person to achieve their dreams.
How should we deal with that as a nation, really?
It's very topical at the moment. I have to say, in the summer of last year, I trained to be an invigilator so I could support the team during GCSE Maths and English retakes. And actually, it was one of the most valuable things I've done. I'm quite cross I'd never done it before. And, to sit in an exam hall with young people and see both those that you thought, they're going to get it this time, and I'm so chuffed because they were so close at school and they're going to get that grade, versus those that were just bewildered and the whole pressure of taking that exam. And then being there on results day and talking to young people that, in spite of the fact that they've come to class and they've tried, still aren't getting that magic grade. And I think something quite radical needs to change with retakes, particularly on maths, I have to say. I think it needs to be much more applied to the subject area they're looking at. I was in a workshop last year with our plumbing students. You learn pretty quickly the importance of measuring an angle correctly when you're, bending copper piping for plumbing. Or if I'm in the hairdressing salon or in our catering department, you learn pretty quickly about weights, volumes, ratios. You teach the kids and you apply it in that way, it's meaningful. And I do feel really strongly that something needs to change around teaching and application of maths.
Vocational maths almost.
Yes.
Yeah. Great. Right, so that's really interesting to hear, and clearly those challenges are facing everybody in further education at the moment. I know that one of your interests going back has been sport. Does a belief in sport and a passion for sport affect how you run a college?
Yes, so I'm well known for being about the most competitive person going.
Yes.
Although bizarrely, I'm about the worst person at sport ever. I love watching sport. That's a real passion and a real privilege to watch sport, whether that's watching my kids play or watching a local team play or a professional team play. I absolutely love it. I love winning though.
Yes.
Nothing gave me more pleasure last year than our boys' football academy winning the league for the first time in years. I was cheering them on. But I also was lucky enough to work on the London 2012 Olympics,
right.
Both originally when I was at CEDA on the bid stage and all the way through to the actual games. And, I can't believe how long ago it was now, but thinking back to that summer of 2012 and the pride that people felt that we were hosting those games, and I am biased, but I think it is the greatest Olympic and Paralympic Games in recent history.
Totally agree. And the country won. We all won a gold medal. That's how it felt.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, we need to do something again like that, don't we? We need to find a reason to. What a celebration. Okay, so sport's important to you, but if I was to be walking in your office instead of my office right now, would I be scared by something that potentially is in the office?
Well, somebody said to me the other day that when they walked in my office, they just didn't know where to look. For a whole host of things that live in my office, including quite a lot of sporting memorabilia. But I think you might be referring to either my alligator or my iguana. I think it is probably the alligator.
Yeah, I was surprised to hear you had an alligator in your office.
I think all college principals should keep a taxidermied animal in their office just as a talking point.
Right, so this is a real alligator, which is no longer alive.
True,
yes.
correct.
Yeah. So it's a stuffed taxidermy alligator.
Yes.
But that has a history, that alligator.
He does have a history. So in the James Bond film Live and Let Die,
yes,
there is a scene where James Bond escapes the villains by climbing over a sort of lagoon, sort of horrible area of water, by climbing over the heads of a number of crocodiles and an alligator.
Yes.
And this is said alligator.
What about that? So it feels like the spirit of Tracy Emin lives on almost to a certain extent. This art installation, conversation topic, shift of mood for anybody who comes into the office.
It might. I'd love to know what she might think, or how we could work it into a piece of art. But he's become a talking point, and well, I guess that's not a surprise. But what's really important to me, and we talked about my early days and my dreams. When I went into my head teacher's office, it was normally because there was some issue or I was in trouble, or it was something not that exciting. I never particularly excelled at much in school. And so I think when people come to my office, they should come because we're going to celebrate their success, or I want to hear about something they've done. And I want my office to actually represent the college, to be a place of interest where people can feel at ease or relax, or their first point be, what is that? And I think that's important.
It breaks away any apprehension, doesn't it?
It does, it does.
It changes mood. And
although I am keeping vapes that I confiscate from students who are vaping in the alligator's mouth.
Oh, really? Right,
Yeah.
okay, yes, yeah. There you go. Wonderful. Okay, so that's a fantastic story, Julie. But when we get to these end of these conversations and we've heard about this wonderful experience you've had and how you've got to where you are now, I always think about people who would like to go on that journey and reach that level of, seniority within an organisation. What advice would you give to somebody who's kind of feels maybe a bit stuck or unsure of where to go next?
Yeah, I think I'd give two slightly different bits of advice. I think the first, for someone who isn't working in further education, that might be thinking of a career change or something different, my advice would be go and visit your local FE college. I mean, don't just turn up, preferably make an appointment and try and make a connection at the college, because one of my great passions is actually making connections between business and colleges. And businesses have so much to give colleges. And actually, in making that link, you might find actually there's a bridge into working in that college, in the same way that when I first visited the college, I suddenly had my eyes opened to the opportunities it had for me as a career. I think for somebody already in the sector who is looking at taking that next step, whether it's into leadership or management, I'm a huge fan and a huge believer of having a mentor. I've had my incredible executive coach for over 20-something years.
Wow.
And I think it is about talking to the right people, getting advice. I always say we work in an education provider. If we're not training our own staff, we're doing something very wrong. So if there's some training you can access, as I said, or some experience or a mentor from another college, I would always encourage somebody to seek that out. You know, sometimes you can fall into a trap of, as a manager, thinking, well, that person's happy in that job. But has anyone ever asked them or encouraged them to think bigger, to dream bigger, and then to give them the tools to do that? So I'm a real believer in doing that. And, you know, my door is always open to give advice to people across the sector, because I've been very lucky. And that is because of people who have supported me. And if I can give back in any way, then I'm always very keen to.
That's wonderful, that magic link of human beings encouraging, helping, supporting.
Yeah.
And I know what the title of this conversation is going to be. It's going to be Dream Bigger, because it features so much in your dialogue, which is wonderful. Okay, just one final thing we'll throw in. You don't keep your skill set just in the college. You get involved in other places outside of the college as well. One of them being Epsom, the racecourse.
Yes. I've always believed that alongside one's day job, as long as it doesn't interfere with it, there's huge value in being a non-exec director or governor at a school, because I think it broadens your horizons, your networks. I also believe in giving back. I've been on the board of a number of charities as well. The Epsom Racecourse connection is something incredibly special and something I'm very proud of. I grew up 5 minutes from Epsom Downs, which is the home of the Derby, the greatest flat race in the world. And I grew up as a child when it was on a Wednesday. I hasten to add, I wasn't bunking off school. My school closed on a Wednesday, watching the race and being intrigued by the spectacle of a huge sporting event. And over the years, I've been a few times, but I'd always remained very interested. And through my role as Principal and Chief Exec at Nescot, had the good fortune to meet Brian Finch, who is the chair of Epsom Racecourse. Again, it comes back to meeting incredible people who take a chance on you. And Brian and I both shared our passion about the local area, about social mobility, about how do we get more people coming back to watch the races, more people wanting to work at the racecourse, and understanding the value that having a sporting venue like that adds to the economy. And about 1.5 years after knowing him, he and the committee there approached me about joining the committee of the racecourse, which I joined at the start of this year in January. And what an incredible first season it has been, and an absolute privilege and a real highlight for me. And I guess we go full circle, having started with my childhood, was to be able to take my parents to the Derby Festival this year and to stand out on the Royal Box. It was only because the King and Queen weren't there that I could get in, and watch the greatest horse race in the world. And to see a little bit of pride in my parents' eyes that actually, we were able to enjoy that. But just as much as that, the pride of seeing my students working there.
Yeah.
That goes back to why not them? And I say to them, not just necessarily going to work here. Why shouldn't you be stood there watching the races? That's what I love about what I do, and that's why I will continue to work in the sector.
That's fantastic. Julie, thank you so much for sharing your story today. It's been a wild ride from those early days in PR through the various sort of government agencies and 2012 Olympics and walking over bridges and alligators with vapes in their mouths. And then we finished off in the Royal Box at Epsom. So it's been a wonderful journey. Thank you so much for sharing it with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Inspiring Working Lives, the Morgan Hunt podcast, driving positive change and helping you to grow your career. If you've enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next inspiring conversation. For more insights, opportunities and updates, head to morganhunt.com.